You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. My guest today is Keila Dolle, actress, filmmaker, comedian, and podcast host. Keila's mission is to create projects that have social impact. Her past film projects include Dancing Man the documentary, featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and other international news outlets, and We'll Never Make It, an award-winning short film that is currently available on Amazon. Keila is a fixture in the LA comedy scene. She hosted and produced The Scramble, a brunch variety show, for 3.5 years. In 2019, Keila hosted the comedy podcast Kings of Influence with Ray William Johnson and Epic Lloyd. She caught the podcast bug, so when that show ended, she launched her own show called Crying Behind Sunglasses. Keila's experiences with anxiety and panic disorder, as well as growing up with a brother who has autism, led to a lifelong passion for psychology and mental health. Keila lives in LA with her scruffy dog Coconut, and her main interests outside of being an overachiever are wine, chocolate, feminism, and weighted blankets. Like, hi, bestie. I too love all those things. All right, so Keila and I talk about her childhood, growing up with her brother, the loss of her biological father, coping with anxiety and panic disorder, and how therapy and meditation have seen her through it all. As always, stay tuned after for my final thoughts, and here's Keila. Hey, Keila, thank you so much for being here. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I found your podcast, Crying Behind Sunglasses, and that name, it is so catchy.
Thank you.
I love that. Where was the inspiration? How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, so I started that podcast almost 2 years ago, and basically I wanted to do a funny mental health podcast, so I wanted a title that kind of encapsulated that. And the funny part is I actually thought about the title way before I thought about having a podcast. You know that moment when, in the before times at least, when you'd be in therapy in person and the therapist would be like, oh, well, there's our time, at the end of the session. So usually, at least for me, that would be when I would be right on the verge of tears, and then I would have to collect myself and walk through the waiting room and the street back to my car. And I would always be like, oh my God, I hope I have my sunglasses in my bag so I can just cover my face, because I'm not ashamed of my emotions, but it just feels very intimate to cry in front of strangers. That was literally where I got the title of the podcast from. Was me just.
It's very relatable. Yeah.
And I think also it has a little bit of a double meaning where it's like we put on these facades to seem like we're cool and everything's fine, but on the inside we're all human. We all have these same problems.
And just kind of maybe a random question, but not so random, but do you miss going to therapy in person, or are you happy to have it virtual?
It's interesting because I think there are advantages to both. I do love being able to be cozy on my couch with my dog while I talk to my therapist, but at the same time, like, it does lose a little bit of that personal touch. So I do kind of miss that aspect of it. And also just having an excuse
Yeah.
to leave my house is exciting.
Yes, I like that's it for me. On one hand, I have small kids, and so it is easier. It is 10 times easier, truly, to just be virtual and have whatever is going on in our house going on still. But I, before I had to get childcare no matter what, and I had to make that time for myself. And I do miss that a little, just even driving there was 15 minutes in the car by myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it just felt like more of an experience
Yeah, I
almost.
think there was a little bit more of a formality to it, and it
Hmm.
was more separated from daily life. So I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah. So, the mental health podcast with some humor. I know one of your taglines is the mental health podcast for the rest of us. What were you feeling like for you there was a lacking in a certain type of conversation around mental health?
Yeah, well, I would say when I first was thinking about doing a podcast, I wasn't sure what the topic would be. I used to co-host the first podcast that I hosted was Kings of Influence with Ray William Johnson and Epic Lloyd. He's from Epic Rap Battles on YouTube. And so that was more of a
Mm,
comedy show. And when that ended, I had caught the bug and I thought, oh, well, I really want to do my own show. What should it be about? And I made a whole list of all these things that I'm interested in that are outside of the entertainment industry, just because I think there are
mm-hmm,
more than enough podcasts about filmmaking and acting. And it's just, I didn't want to add to the noise. I wanted to do something unique. And when I was listening to other podcasts in the mental health space, I was noticing that even if they were hosted by a comedian, it was kind of like you would walk away feeling like you took on someone else's trauma, but then there was no resolution and it just felt very heavy or sad. So for
mm,
me, I do want to explore those dark topics, but I also want to bring some joy into people's lives and also show them practical things that they can apply to their lives to make it better.
mm-hmm. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, it's you like how much do you get out of it? Because I feel like this is mostly about me a lot of the time. Like
Yeah, well,
how many
that's like the side
strategies
benefit.
can I get out of it? Yeah.
Sorry, say it again.
I was just saying that it's like every podcast essentially becomes like a therapy session for me. Like
Yeah.
just learning more about what to do and how to do it and how other people do it is so valuable.
I didn't realize until after I had been doing the podcast for a few months that you're right. There's this benefit for me as well where it feels therapeutic and it feels like I'm learning, like I'm absorbing all the knowledge and stories from these other people. And it's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Is there an episode that, someone listening who's not heard your show yet, is there an episode that you would that sticks out to you that you would point them out and say, you know what, if you don't listen to anything else, listen to this one? I
Okay.
know that's a hard question.
That's a tough one because I
I
don't want
know,
anyone on
because
my
you
show
love
to
them
think.
all,
Well,
right?
yeah, because I don't want anyone on my show to think like, oh, she doesn't like me as much as the other guests that she's had, blah blah.
I know.
I would say that so if people want to get to know me, I guess
Mm,
there's a solo episode I did at the beginning of this season called When It's Time to Let Go, and that's good because it just kind of gives a backstory of what I'm about and what I'm trying to do with the show, and a lot
perfect.
of
Yeah.
my own personal stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then as far as like recent episodes, I would say there was an interview I did with a comedian and actress, Andy Poland. She actually lost both of her sons to suicide. And
Oh my goodness.
I know. And I remember going into that interview, I was like, oh boy, how am I going to make this fun?
Yeah.
Or where are we going to find some sort of
Humor.
silver lining? Yeah, some sort of silver
Yeah.
lining here. And I was just really surprised by her attitude and the positivity that she brought to the table. And it was really
Wow.
a beautiful talk. So I would definitely recommend it. And it's surprisingly uplifting. I know it sounds
Wow.
crazy, but it was really, really cool to talk to her.
Wow, I will definitely put that in the show notes. That sounds fascinating.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing. I know I put you on the spot, and I know as a podcaster, it's like you love all of your guests. I just sometimes there are those ones that you just can't get out of your head. But anyway, all right. So I guess I did listen to your solo ones, and I wanted to ask you, you know, your anxiety, panic disorder, you know, take someone who doesn't know what that feels like through an experience that you've had. Like how does it manifest for you?
Sure. So I guess if you've never had a panic attack, it's a little bit hard to describe. But I think the first time I ever had one, I thought I was having a heart attack.
Mm,
So physically, at least for me, it manifests in chest pain
mm,
and feeling like hyperventilating and just like everything is out of control. Sometimes my vision might narrow or everything just feels completely out of control, you know?
mm-hmm,
And I think I didn't realize that I had a problem until I think it was senior year of college and I was getting ready to graduate and there were a lot of different things happening. I think that my first real boyfriend had we had broken up a few months before that and I was doing the stress of graduation and just looking out into this very uncertain future and it just kind of spiraled, you know. And like I said, I felt like I was having sorry, like I said, I thought I was having a heart attack, so I literally called an ambulance.
wow. Yeah,
And
wow.
I remember when I went to the hospital, this was in New York, they were like, "Oh, you don't have a heart problem. You just have anxiety. You're fine." And
My god.
so,
Like get over it basically. Like
yeah, and it's tough because it was like, well, I'm glad I'm not actually dying, but that
right.
feeling, the feeling also sucks. And how do I make it go away? And so it's just been a journey of learning to manage my lifestyle and also in the moment having different coping techniques for that and also drugs, you know, better living
Hmm.
through chemistry.
Hmm. How often would you say you did then or still do? Like how often is a panic attack like that happening for you?
It really varies, I
Mm,
would say, depending on what's going on in my life.
mm-hmm.
If things are fine and there's not really much going on that's going to trigger me, then I would say I don't have a really big panic attack more than once every few months at
Mm-hmm.
most. But if I am in a stressful situation, like I remember in my last relationship when things were going south, it was like, you know, almost every other day. So it really varies, at least for me, I would say, depending on my life circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And going back now to college and having, that experience, I know you mentioned in your show that you ended up losing friends through that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In college, yeah, it was sad. I remember, um, well, I think that there just wasn't as much of an open discussion about mental health back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even that long ago, but it's changed so much in the last few years, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was a stigma around like, oh, she had this nervous breakdown, she's crazy, she's unstable.
Mm.
Um, we don't need to be friends with her, if that
Wow.
makes sense. And so I remember at the time I was living with my my best college friend. And when I moved out and graduated and moved back to LA, like we don't talk anymore. And it sucks because, you know, there's nothing I can really do about that. And obviously, friends come in and out of your life. I don't think that every friend is meant to be forever, but it's still, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's still sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of what I talk about on the show are these stigmas around mental health. What do you see as some of the the biggest ones? I mean, you lived it in that regard, right? Like you were just deemed as, oh, unstable and crazy. Like, what else do you see out there, or perhaps through your show that you're coming across that you really want to sort of help clear the air on?
Sure. I would say that for me, before I started the show, and even as I've been putting stuff out there, I've been afraid of like, oh no, if I put this out there, does it mean that people aren't going to want to hire me for a job because they think that I'm unstable or things like that? And I haven't really run into that issue as much anymore because I think like I said, especially the weird blessing of the pandemic is that because almost everyone had some sort of mental health crisis during
Mm-hmm.
lockdown, I feel like people are more understanding now.
Mm-hmm.
So it just feels like a little bit of a different world. But yeah, I would say also that just because someone has some sort of mental health issue doesn't mean that they aren't able to manage their lives or that they are always a victim or that kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. 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 How do you cope now,
Hmm.
with anxiety, with panic disorder, like depression? I know you've talked about too. Like, what are some of your coping mechanisms?
I would say, well, I've been in and out of therapy for most of my adult life. I think talk therapy is a really, really great tool if it's something that works for you. So that
Mm-hmm.
would be number one for me is therapy. And also just taking stock of my life and saying, like, hey, why do I feel this way right now? What is it specifically that is giving me this feeling? And is there a way for me to change that situation or not? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
just having that reflection and having friends who are understanding is so helpful. And especially because they can just kind of bring you back down to earth and remind you of the reality of the situation, which
Mm-hmm.
brings me to my next point about grounding. So if I'm in the middle of kind of starting to spiral out, a lot of times what I'll do if I can remember is to just do a grounding exercise. So that would be just tapping into the different senses. What am I feeling? What do I see in the room? What do I smell or hear? Right? And that brings me into the
Mm-hmm.
present. Or is like is there anything in this actual present moment that is a problem? No. Like, you know,
Right.
I am I safe? Yes. Just asking these really basic questions and also just coming into like a really uh grounded understanding of the present moment is so helpful. And meditation has really changed my life. I try to meditate every day for at least 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that it helps me to kind of break that pattern of
Mm-hmm.
whatever the thing is. Instead of immediately reacting, I can just see something or hear something, decide how I want to respond, and then go from there. So it kind of
Mm-hmm.
slows things down in that way.
How did you start your meditation practice?
Let's see. I used to teach yoga, so I would say
Ah.
I don't remember the first time I meditated, but I would guess it was probably in a yoga class, and kind of went from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got more serious about it. There was a period of time where my brother and my stepdad were both in and out of the hospital at the same time for like a full year. They're both fine now, but it was just this weird coincidence that they were both having health problems at the same time. And I remember,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it is for you, but for me, if my family is having health issues, it's really hard for me to focus and it causes me a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for new things to help me cope. And I remember that every morning I would go up onto my roof. The place that I was living at the time had this really nice rooftop that kind of overlooked this reservoir, and I would just meditate. And I think the best gateway to get into meditating for me was to go on YouTube and look up guided meditations. And it was just really easy because then I could have someone else tell me what to think
Right. Right.
for a few minutes instead of having to worry about my own thoughts.
Right.
And then I think once I ran out of those, I started using Insight Timer, which I really recommend. It's a free app. And they have so like thousands of different guided meditations on all different subjects. And now I kind of alternate between either doing a guided meditation, or sometimes I'll just literally use the timer on there. And what I like with the timer on there too is that you can kind of DJ your own meditations. So you can put background noise like water or nature or guitar or chanting or nothing. And you can also put in different gongs, like at different intervals of your meditation. Yeah, it's fun. So,
I love that DJ your own meditation.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know, obviously I'm not going to put any dubstep in there, but it's fun.
You might.
Everyone's got different tastes. Right. I'm not here to fault any of them.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that in general, I try, if I can, to do a silent meditation so that I can tap more into what I'm thinking and feeling that day. But if it's really hard for me to concentrate, then a lot of times it's easier to just go with the guided meditation.
I ask because I've had meditation on my to-do list for like 5 years. And, you know, every time I say, just do 5 minutes, just do 10 minutes, just do whatever it is, it's like I'll do it for a few days and then I fall off of it. And I mean, every person that I respect and every person that has a way of life that I look up to has incorporated meditation, and you would think that that would be more than enough for me to stick to it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is.
Well, what are you doing when you're meditating? Are you doing guided ones, or are you just like setting a timer and sitting there in silence?
So my most recent attempt came from, I read Alexis Connison's book, The Diet-Free Revolution, and it's all about, you know, anti-diet culture, and I've been really struggling with my body image of late, and, you know, she talks about making, basically how to eat more mindfully can also come through with adding a meditation practice to your life, and so she offers a actual 5-minute guided meditation, and I have sat there through it a few times, like I said, but the idea is to do it every day, and I don't.
Oh, so you're trying to listen to the same track from her.
Yes.
Well, I think that's your problem. I think you gotta get some variety in there.
I gotta mix it up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Keila, I will try.
And also, I would say, having an accountability buddy. So if you have, it's kind of like going to the gym, you know? So if you have someone to go with you, then you're more likely to do it. So you don't necessarily have to have someone with you, obviously, doing it. But if you could have a friend that you check in with and say, like, hey, I'm trying to develop this habit of doing this. Is there some sort of daily habit that you're trying to develop? Can we text each other and hold each other accountable? That kind of thing. I find for me, peer pressure is a great motivator.
Totally. Yeah. I like that. That's a good idea. Because I'm sure, I know. Everybody's got something they're working on.
Absolutely. I mean, all of these things are obviously easier said than done. And I also have found that finding a way to meditate in a group setting can be a good way to like re-inspire my own personal practice. So if that's at a yoga studio, or like I went to a retreat at a Buddhist monastery recently, and that was obviously like a lot of meditation.
Yeah.
So just finding ways to connect with others that are doing it. You can see like, oh, what are their techniques, and just get a little bit inspired again.
And, you know, speaking of the, you know, connection, and I think that's a great idea. And I've had yoga on my to-do list, you know, again. But, I did at one time have a very strong yoga practice, and I've just gotten out of it. But, you know, you mentioned before going back that you have supportive friends, and that is part of how you cope. Do you have any pieces of it, any advice for someone listening that wants to support a friend with anxiety or depression or mental illness? Like, how, what are some tips? What are some tools? What's some advice for that person based on your experience as being, a friend who has support?
Yeah,
What does it look like?
that's a great question. I think to be a good friend to someone with depression specifically is to just show up and be there and not judge, and also not always asking so many questions of like, how can I help, but just deciding to help, like, hey,
Yeah.
let's go to dinner, let's go for a walk, let's do this, let's do that. Because a lot of times if you're depressed, you don't really have the capacity to make all those decisions, and it feels exhausting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say for that. And then as far as anxiety, um, if I am in the middle of spiraling, I uh, also I can't really explain to someone while I'm in the middle of having a panic attack how to be the best person for me. You know what I mean? So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that they have to kind of figure out on their own, unfortunately, or have to talk to them about it in advance. But I would say just doing what you can to de-escalate and offering just listening, just being there. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a lot more simple than people would make it out to be. It's being there and listening, and being that space where the person doesn't feel judged, and also maybe being able to change the subject to something else if the person just is really stuck on one idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have not had a panic attack before, but I do experience anxiety. And, several months ago, I had an anxiety attack. And I call it that specifically because, it's, and I'm sure you can relate. It's kind of wild that you hear terms like that and you think you know what it feels like until you have one.
Hmm.
And it's so out of body in a sense. And the one thing I would add to what you said is, yes, I totally agree. Like, asking the questions in the middle of it is counterproductive.
Hmm.
um, but what happened with me was my husband happened to be around for it, and I didn't wasn't expecting it, and I'd never had one before, and it was a couple of days later where I said, okay, like, this is what happened, and should that happen again, now I know how I'd want to be supported. And I think coming at it from the person giving support, days, weeks, however long later, I think it's okay to ask, how can I support you in that situation? Obviously, like we said, not while they're in it, but
Yeah.
getting them at a good time and place where they're feeling secure, and you're maybe having a nice dinner together and you're chatting and you're bonding, and just say, I know you went through that. I want to be there for you. What does that look like for you?
Right.
Because
Exactly.
it's going to be different for everyone. Like, I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be made. I just was like, and I had no idea any of those things until it happened, right? So I think it can be different for everyone, and I think it's okay to ask.
Yeah, I think that it is a great idea to check in with yourself and figure out, like, okay, what is it that I need? How can I express it to my partner when things are more calm? So some people want to be
Mm-hmm.
completely left alone. Uh, Maybe for someone else, it might be really comforting to be held, but for you, that's not what you want. And so
Yeah.
it's really important, I think, to be able to communicate that to your friend or your partner or family
Mm-hmm.
member when things are more calm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned you've been in and out of therapy. What what did that look like for you getting started? A big part of what I'm doing here is to try to, for me, I didn't understand therapy could be for someone like me, could be for someone, who was just struggling with transitions and struggling with overwhelm. And it took hearing from someone else who was in a similar position as me to say, yo, I go to therapy, like, check it out. Like, what how did it look? What did it look like for you when you got started? What made you go? When did you pick up the phone?
Sure.
Take me back.
Sure. I would say my first experience with therapy was in college. They have those like free college
Mm,
counseling, or not college
mm-hmm,
counseling, the free mental health counseling at my school. So
mm-hmm,
that was my first experience, and that was because I remember my biological dad passed away when I was a freshman in college, and
mm,
so even though I did not have a close relationship with him, it affected me in a lot of ways. And
I'm sure.
so being able to have someone to talk to was great. But I remember I only kind of did that for a few months, and it was fine, but it was also one of those like grad students who's learning how to be a therapist. So I feel like
Yeah.
it wasn't great, you know?
Right.
And so I would say I got more serious about it maybe in my early to mid 20s. And I've always, like, I have good health insurance, and I just
Mm,
kind of, I'm trying to think, I probably like went through a bad breakup or something and felt like, okay, I need to sort my life out, and just went through my health insurance and
mm-hmm,
uh, went therapist shopping. So just for me, that looks like going on Psychology Today or on my health insurance website and finding a bunch of different therapists, looking at their reviews, and then also I will call and listen to their outgoing voicemail, and if I don't like the way their voice sounds, then I don't I don't leave a message.
That's amazing.
uh,
I love that.
well, because it's like
Yeah.
if they don't have a
Yeah. Go ahead.
if
Yeah.
they don't have a comforting voice, like I'm not going to want to talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's just one of those just as people, right? Like almost like my experience is that I saw a picture of my therapist and I was like, "Oh, she kind of looks like me." And for some reason that was comforting.
Yeah.
It's like just one of those things that you can't totally explain, but you just know it when you hear it or know it when you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like for a while I had like an older therapist, and that was really comforting to me because I was like, oh, she's like a sweet older hippie lady, and I found that to be really comforting. But then after a while I felt like I didn't really like that anymore because there were so many things that she just didn't get because she was older, about like the internet or other things.
Social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now I have a
It's
therapist that is closer to my age,
mhm.
which seems to be a better fit for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's really like there is someone out there for everyone, but it can be kind of like dating in that it takes a little while to find the right one. And I think I always recommend for people to make an appointment with more than one therapist. Like try to have an intake session with at least two people before you settle on one, just so you can have something to compare it to and say, oh, okay, well,
Mhm.
I like this person the best because of XYZ, instead of defaulting, you know, to whoever is there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And yeah, and a lot of therapists, well, not I don't know about a lot, but I've heard from several that there are therapists out there that will give, that first not session, but like a consult call,
Yes,
that
yes, like
that you
it's
don't need to pay for, just like a meet and greet almost.
absolutely like a 15-20 minute phone
Yeah.
consult, and you can usually get an idea of their personality and whether or not it's worth your time to actually get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so going back a minute, if you can recall, your experience in college after your father passed away, what would you have wanted out of that therapeutic relationship that you didn't get?
It was so long ago, it's hard to say, but uh, I think I felt really alone, and it sucked because like your freshman year of college is a time when you should feel like excited and like you're having so much fun and feeling so carefree, and I felt like an outsider. So Like when that happened, I felt like, oh, now I'm the weird angsty girl, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not sure what the therapist could have done, but something to just kind of make me feel a little bit less alone in that, like maybe if they had referred me to a grief group or something, because I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like I was the only kid in my class that was going through something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would have been really helpful.
Mm-hmm. How, and obviously I don't know the ins and outs of your story and necessarily how much you want to share, but you know given that you didn't have I guess a strong relationship with him or any relationship at all, I'm not sure,
Hmm.
how does that impact you now that you're further removed from the experience of losing him?
Sure. Well, I'm an open book, so I'm happy to give you the details. So basically, my brother and I were born. It was me and him, and my mom and my bio dad. And then they separated when I was really young. He was verbally abusive and alcoholic. And so
Mm,
everything that I heard was always like, oh, you're better off with not having a relationship with him, things like that, which I
yes.
totally understood. But at the same time, like, you still want to know, where did I come from? And that's a very normal human instinct to have. So I think what was tough for me at the time was two things, is that, and like, one, I felt guilty because he died of alcoholism, basically, like cirrhosis of the liver. So at the time, and I don't think this anymore because I know it's not how it works, but at the time I felt very guilty, like, oh my God, what if I had reached out to him sooner? Would he have been
Mm,
happier? And then he wouldn't have drank himself to death. That was one.
mm,
And then I think the other one was just a lot of regret of um,
mhm,
wishing that I had had that relationship with him. And another thing that was kind of smaller was, oh, do I have this gene? Am I going to be an alcoholic? I had a minute where I was
mm.
worried about that, and luckily I did not inherit that gene, so that's good. But just to go
Mhm,
back to the guilt part, I will say to anyone who deals with a loved one who is is an addict, it's, there's not, you can't save them from themselves. That is a decision they have to make on their own, and it
mm,
doesn't really make a difference as far as like you having a relationship with them or not. They have to be the ones to get help. So and the other thing that I had to learn, which I believe now, and at the time people were telling me but I didn't believe them, was uh, with a parent who's it's always on the parent to have a relationship with a child. It's not for
mm,
me to feel guilty that we didn't have a relationship, because that was on him to reach out and build that, and
mhm,
he didn't, you know? So
mhm,
I no longer feel any guilt about that, but it definitely took a lot of soul searching and therapy and everything to come to that realization of how things are.
mhm. Yeah, and thank you for sharing. Yes, you know what, and it sounds like as you're talking and you say it that I didn't believe them, and in different ways I feel like we can all relate to that. Like, and even just earlier I was sharing, with the body positivity, it's like I can hear and believe that there is a way to feel comfortable and love my body for what it is. But until I do the work, you know, I don't I don't believe you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we can all find something within ourselves to relate that to. And so I really appreciate you sharing because yeah, it's hard work, and you can say it in a sentence, but it took years, I imagine, to get there.
Absolutely. It just takes time and revisiting. And I think I didn't even really fully process that death until a few years later. And I think when I had my first real panic attack and then started going to therapy, I was like, oh, right. Okay. So this
Mm,
isn't just about graduating and a breakup. It's also about the fact that I didn't process when
yes.
my father died. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
now I learned, okay, when something happens, I have to deal with it right away because otherwise it's just going to come back and it's just going to be
Yes.
worse because when those feelings are stewing inside of you, it's just going to kind of metastasize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you um so you mentioned your brother. So your brother didn't have a relationship with him either?
No, no, we're a package deal. I mean,
Okay.
he and I are only a year and a half apart.
Okay.
And I remember, at least as it was told to me, because I was a baby at the time when they separated, is that,
Mm.
um, so side note that is relevant. My brother has autism, and so my bio dad kind of rejected him because of this.
Mm.
He wanted to put him in an institution and have
Mm.
a real son, quote unquote.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know.
Mm.
So my mom,
Yeah. Mm. It's
I
heartbreaking.
know, yes, that was a big factor in the divorce, aside from the problems they had going on between the two of them. So I remember my mom just getting her tubes tied and saying, like, no, these are your kids. I'm not having any more kids, and
Oh.
this is your real son, you know?
Oh.
And so when they
Yeah.
separated, he only wanted to see me. He didn't want to see my brother. And she told him, like, you either see both of them or you don't see either of them. And he's like, fine, bye, you know?
Wow.
So that was
Wow.
kind of how things went. And I think as a kid and a young adult, it took me a while to accept and process, like, different abandonment issues or daddy issues, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. But
Right.
luckily my mom did remarry when we were pretty young, and I did have a father figure in my life, my stepdad,
Mm-hmm.
who is still around. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful for that, because I think just growing up with someone who is stepping up to play that role was just really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard you share on your show that as a child, you really felt like an advocate for your brother
Hmm.
and in many ways felt like you needed to step in for the friends and the kids his age that weren't doing it. Like you were his friend and his advocate, and I can imagine as a kid that feeling heavy. What did it feel like? How do you, I don't know, how do you describe it? I want, it's better obviously to have your words on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would describe it as heavy, because it was just like that's the reality that I knew,
Mm,
was just that he was different from other kids, and kids can be really mean and ignorant, and it's not their fault because they just don't know, or their parents haven't taught
yeah.
them about people who are different. So I'm not quite sure what the question was, though. Just like, how did it feel to protect him from
Well,
other kids?
yeah, I guess maybe did it just come naturally to you to do that?
Yeah,
Like it just was like this is my brother and it's ride or die. Like that's it.
basically, yes, just because he's older, so he's always been around. So it's just always kind of been a fact of my life. It's not something I've thought about or questioned.
Mm.
Like, I've had people say to me, and they don't say this anymore, but I feel like I used to have kids ask me, like, oh, do you ever wish that you had like a normal sibling?
Oh.
No, I don't wish for that, because this is who he is, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just kind of been something that has been a gift, because it's taught me so much compassion and empathy.
Mm.
And I've really, like, would never have learned any of that if I had a quote unquote normal sibling.
Right, right, right. And having had the experience of growing up with him side by side and being there with
Hmm.
him, what do you wish more people understood about the autistic community and someone that they might come across who's autistic?
I would say that, well, there's such a spectrum. That's the thing. So every
Mm,
single person who has autism, it's completely different. There is there are people who are nonverbal that are,
Mhm.
can't really do that much for themselves. And then there are people who can, quote unquote, pass as neurotypical and hold a job. And they might just be like, oh, a little bit weird, a little bit
Mhm.
dorky. And my brother, he is high functioning, but he does not pass as neurotypical. So
Mm.
I think for someone that's like him, it's to understand that he actually is really smart, and the only impairment he really has is that it's just the social and emotional cues, and the communication. But
Mhm.
he is just as smart, if not smarter, than most of the people that you would meet walking down the street. And you just have to figure out how to communicate with him in his own way.
Mhm. I just heard of actually my mom was just telling me that a friend of hers has two friends actually. They both have autistic children, and I have no idea where on the spectrum they lie. I know they are both high
Hmm.
functioning, but I don't know anything more about it than that. But that they're both in their 20s and their kids are, and the mothers now are coming together to create a matchmaking
Oh my God,
service
how cute.
for. Yeah, it's like how amazing is that? And I don't know much more about it, and it's not out yet. But it's so funny. I just literally had that conversation with her, earlier today, and yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to want to be around people who can understand your experience in some way without having to fumble through the questions, almost like I'm fumbling with them with you now.
Yeah, no, totally.
Like,
Did you
yeah,
see there's a Netflix show called Love on the Spectrum? It's a dating show for people.
I I've heard of it. I've not
Okay,
watched
well,
it.
highly recommend. It's
Okay.
really cute. It's just literally what it sounds like. It's all people who are on the autism spectrum going on dates with each other, and some of them
Mhm.
have dating coaches, and some of them, or a lot of them, have never even been on a date before, and just kind of watching them go through it. It's a really,
Mhm.
really cute show. Uh, but
Mm.
yeah,
I'll have to look it
let me
up.
know
Yeah.
whenever that dating service launches. I will sign my brother up. I just because he has never really had a girlfriend, and I know he likes girls. He's had
Yeah.
crushes, and he like I remember like he took a girl to prom or liked the different dances when he was in school,
Mhm.
and like here and there he might see a movie with someone, but it's like he's never really gone on a date, I don't think. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think my mom and I would love to see him with a girl who he could relate to.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah.
really cute idea. He has a lot of friends who also have developmental disorders, and I agree with you. I think that they have a different understanding between each other.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you know when that
I
comes out.
yeah, no,
Uh,
I would definitely, I think that it would be really popular because there's
mhm.
a different understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know that shapes a lot of the work you do today and sort of where your passion for it comes, just having your brother in your life and that experience. Is there anything having to do with your acting career, that whole world that has an effect on your mental health and why you're doing what you're doing? Like, did that play any role in where you are with all that?
Yeah, I think.
I'm struggling with my words a little. I'm so sorry. I'm like, just, I don't know. I'm having a
Oh
day.
no, I
I'm
understood what
sorry.
you said. So I think for me and a lot of other people who are actors, I'm just really fascinated by psychology and the human condition. And so anything I can do to learn more about how our brains work and what makes people tick, it's just more information for me as an actor anytime that I go
Mm,
to play a character, because I'm not always going to play someone that is similar to me. And
right.
so the more understanding that I can have about the world around me and about people from all walks of life, then the better actor and better artist I'm going to be.
Mm. I never would have thought of it like that. That's actually fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's silly of me to pretend that I can understand someone without trying to walk in their shoes, and something that I learned really early on in conservatory when I was training at Stella Adler was that you can't judge people, because if you judge someone, then you will never be able to inhabit them as a character, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
So, regardless of what people's life choices are, I try to understand where they're coming from and really see things from their point of view, because, uh, we're all people at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like such an interesting lens to look at that through. I mean, you have to really yeah, and now I'm thinking of any show or anything I've watched where I've really thought that a character was so well done, and now I'm thinking about what the actor had to do in a whole different way.
Yeah, because I mean,
Like my brain is firing in so many directions
yeah,
right now.
I mean, I think also because a big trend in TV and movies right now is to have that kind of anti-hero where there's someone who's made a lot of terrible life choices, but somehow you're still rooting for them. And that's because the actor is investing in that person and not judging them and just kind of going for it 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. No, that's good. Is there anything else like that that I wouldn't have thought about as it relates to mental health or psychology?
I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I think that acting and psychology go hand in hand, because
Mhm.
you can't be afraid of your own emotions. And so a big
Mm.
part of what I do also with why I stay on top of my mental health and I stay on top of my meditating and things like that is because even if I'm playing a character who is unstable or having a lot of issues, like myself as an actor, I have to feel in control and balanced, and then I can put that other stuff on top of it. But if I
Yeah.
start off and I am not doing so well, it's going to take a lot more work for me to get to a baseline before I can then lay a character on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. It's like it's your everyday, and I'm like, whoa, this is brand new
Yeah.
information. All right. Well, you've mentioned a few things, meditating and therapy. Are there other ways that you on a daily basis take care of yourself? I'm getting at, the whole self-care aspect and just anything else come to mind on how you really take care of yourself?
Sure. I would say just spending time with my dog is very important for me.
Mm.
We go on walks 3 or 4 times a day around the neighborhood, and just getting that fresh air and seeing my neighbors and that kind of thing is really important for me. And then of course meditating, which we've already talked to death on this podcast, so I don't need to go over it even more, but I am an advocate of that. Also, journaling. I've
Mm.
been a lifelong journaler. I'm really into it. And so just being able to kind of either vent or figure out my feelings or just have
Mm.
even a stream of consciousness, it helps me to feel like I'm in touch with myself.
Mm-hmm. Do you just like open up to a blank page and just the first thing that comes to your head, jot it down?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you?
Okay.
Do you journal at all?
I used to, and yeah, and I'm it's one of those trying to get back into it things, and I keep going. You know what it is right now. I'm really into the experience of buying
Uh
one.
huh.
Like I keep buying them because they look nice, and I am like totally fantasizing and romanticizing what the experience will be like, and then I just they sit there. It's unfortunate, but they sit there, and it's again the amount of people that I speak to. It's like the meditation, that they also journal, that they also have, a gratitude practice, all of these things that I'm like, okay, do this, do this, do this. And it just, and that's why I always do ask how do you just open it up and start writing? And you don't have to go into it now, but I'm usually asking from a place of, I want to do this and it's something that I want to do, and for some reason it's not happening yet, so maybe there's like a piece I'm missing.
Yeah, I mean, with journaling, I try to do it every day. Sometimes I go where there's a week where I'm just not into it and I don't do it, but I find that it's like anything else. It's just a habit, but it's not for everyone. Like all these different things that are self-care type things, like some people don't like meditation, it's never going to work for them, and that's fine. Or some people also they don't like journaling, fine. As long as just like finding a thing that works for you that you enjoy doing is great, because for some people working out or running, that's their form of meditation, and I think that's totally valid as well.
Totally. All right. Well, Keila, is there anything that you would have asked yourself today around our conversation that I didn't think to, or anything you want to leave people with?
No, I mean, I think you're very comprehensive, and I just really appreciate the chance to come on your show and to share with you and your audience. And, if people resonate with what I'm talking about, then absolutely just come on over, come hang out on Crying Behind Sunglasses, and would love to have you.
Yeah, I I absolutely love that name. Every time I hear it or you say it, it's like, yes, it's so relatable. So anyway, thank you, Keila, so much. This was such a pleasure. And I will link all of your platforms and such in the show notes for everyone to go check you out.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Okay, maybe I'm making too much of it, but I really love the name Crying Behind Sunglasses. And now that I know more about Keila, it totally suits her and her mission. Thank you, Keila, for so openly sharing your story and your experiences. You are helping people. You're helping people feel seen, feel heard, and if they're not feeling seen and heard, they're being educated in such a fun way. I also very much appreciate you walking me through a grounding exercise, and I took your advice and looked up different guided meditations on YouTube to try. I'm happy to say that while I don't yet do it every day, it is an active part of my life, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's right before bed, whatever the case may be. I get excited to try new meditation videos and podcasts. In fact, I also want to share a resource with you that I've found to be very helpful. It's a podcast called Sleep Meditation for Women. If you're looking to just tap a toe into meditation, check it out. All right. So again, thank you, Keila. I learned so much. I know you, the listeners, you did too. Please check out Crying Behind Sunglasses podcast and come back next time for more. All right. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.